session is being moderated by John Nosta, and he is, like I said yesterday, we're reading New Year's resolutions rather than reading bios. So his New Year's resolution is to empower innovation through creativity. So I'd like to welcome them all to the stage. Give them a round of applause. Thank you.
Okay, I was told to speak up, so everyone can hear me. Good morning. Good morning. So how was the first day at the summit? You get the chance to kind of walk around a little bit? Yes, no, I see some heads nodding. So we're at an interesting time. I was talking to Jill, and I think that about a third of the audience, somewhere around 35% or so, have a formal relationship or employed by pharma. So our topic today is about this transition or movement from the pill to a new reality, where the pill becomes a part of that reality, but we're going to change things around a little bit. So we're thinking about the P word this morning and last night. And this P word is looming large in digital health, and that's certainly the role of pharma, but we came up with a whole bunch of interesting ones. That, you know, we define pharma in some ways by the pill, the ubiquitous pill, by parenteral, by patient. What were some of the others that we came up with?
I know I was thinking about profit.
Ah, profit. Isn't that interesting?
Providers.
Providers.
Patch, because not everything is a pill.
Patch, and we're gonna take a journey on patch now. So my name is John Nosta. I'm a healthcare philosopher. I think about this almost obsessively. And let me introduce our panelists today. Guys, why don't you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and we can jump right in.
Thanks, John. My name is Sheth. I'm the head of the medical market development team at MC10. My background is primarily engineering, business, and last 10 years I've spent pretty deep in the med device world. Thanks.
I'm Mike Cantor. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for the New England Quality Care Alliance, or NEQA, which is the physician network for Tufts Medical Center in Boston. We have about 1,850 physicians, and my job is to make sure that we accomplish our triple aim goals of better health, better care, and lower cost, as well as a new quadruple aim goal, we call it now, which is to make sure our providers, our physicians, and their teams are happy in their work, because we're realizing that as our workforce in healthcare becomes more pressured and burned out, our ability to accomplish those other goals becomes more imperiled. So I think providers, what I mentioned is my favorite P word, really is what I work on so that we can take better care of our patients.
James?
Hi, I'm James Zackheim. I work at UCB, a European-based pharmaceutical company specializing in neurology and immunology. I'm responsible for our movement disorders franchise, so including Parkinson's disease, for example, taking solutions from the patient unmet need all the way through to the final solutions.
So, Michael, you're my greatest nightmare. You're a physician and a lawyer.
True.
So we know that your mom is proud.
Yeah, proud. My mom loves that. I think what's interesting to me is that as a physician and a lawyer, I'm a geriatrician by background, so I've always been interested in those areas where law and medicine intersect that don't involve malpractice. So thinking about ethics and end-of-life care, and also more and more recently, regulations. Healthcare is such a tightly regulated industry, and as a pharma person sitting next to me, I'm sure you would agree. You have to think about how do these new devices, how do this new approach to managing symptoms and moving beyond the pill, how is that going to be regulated? There's a whole other topic for discussion.
It's interesting. So, you know, we certainly define therapeutics in the context of the pill, but now we're seeing important changes as technology becomes miniaturized. So we had advances of using drug delivery as a tool for gaining additional information, not just about whether or not you took the dose, if you will, but you actually have clinical information that help guide therapy. And I think that's really interesting work, James, that you guys are doing with movement disorders. So let's kind of start the discussion about the evolution of the patch and how the patch really becomes a bit of a mini computer, a personal computer, and kind of walk through that a little bit. So tell us a little about the development side.
Yeah, so I think the interesting angle is whether it's a transdermal patch, which is what we're focused on in our collaboration with MC10, or a pill. The actual value to patient and the cost driver is not that it's a patch or a pill. It's fractions of a cent to make a pill or a patch. It's the knowledge and data that's associated with that pill or patch that provides the value, what does it do, and drives the cost of development. So now the opportunity is to get inside the black box, because all we know now is a patient gets a prescription for a pill or a patch, and at a population level, some of them have an outcome. But every step in between that, we don't know what's happening. We don't know whether they actually took it. We don't know what happened when they took it. We don't know what physiological parameters changed, and we don't know whether for them there was a meaningful change towards the goal that that patient had. So in collaboration with MC10, we've begun to realize that, at least in the case of a transdermal medicine, which is just another way to get medicine into the body, we have a wearable. MC10 has conformal electronics, and so the opportunity there is to start to fill in the gap in that black box. And now we can have data that describes what actually happens to the patient when they take the medicine, begin a journey towards ultimately better tailoring the medicine to the patient's needs.
I got to tell you, we have digital fitness, digital wellness, digital health, digital medicine. As we walk the convention floor, we see so much about these trackers. And I just think they get a disproportionate amount of the press and mind share, when in fact, I think some of the biggest revolutions in digital health are with you guys, are with taking this thing, which is, in of itself, I guess the patch is nothing new. Transdermal delivery and that kind of stuff is not that new, but you're really taking it to the next level. Tell us a little bit therapeutically in movement disorders, what you're doing, that sort of clinical scenario, and then we'll go over to Rav.
So I mean, there's a variety of movement disorders which are highly amenable to further development in this technological space, because movement happens to be one of the more approachable areas in terms of sensor and tracking technology. And the product that we have is approved for a couple of different therapeutic areas. Parkinson's is one of them. And there, the product that we have is transdermally applied once a day, delivers medicine 24 hours a day. And so the patients are able to sleep through the night, wake up functional. But still, every patient has a waxing and waning during the day. The mornings or the afternoons might be better or worse. Tuesday might be worse than Thursday. But they're taking the same medicine every day for 6 months until they go back to their neurologist. So we'd have very little ability today to tailor their medicine to their individual needs and their fluctuations and tackle the unpredictability. So the technology is really an opportunity to use data to better understand how to help an individual patient. So I wouldn't say personalized, but a personal approach to medicine for them.
And are movement disorders particularly suited to this, just because of the nature of the condition versus something like hypertension?
Movement disorders are well suited, whether it could be Huntington's chorea, it could be Parkinson's disease, it could be restless leg, it could be dystonias, but because they are typically the primary symptoms, not the only symptoms, but the primary symptoms are measurable through accelerometry, actigraphy, EMG, and that's where we have a lot of advance in the technology and the ability to sense. So we have a great ability to track on a minute-by-minute, hour-by-hour basis how that patient is doing in a meaningful way.
Tell us, so let's add that level of complexity technology to the patch, and tell us how you guys are moving forward MC10 in this technology.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
It's just me. Thank you, and that was a phenomenal foundation to start with. So in movement disorders, what we are trying very hard to do is sense the sort of patterns, the aberrations of movement in all the ways possible. And so for us, this actually does include the fact that you can't just measure it from the wrist. You actually need to get information about your gait, about your stability, about your fall risk, et cetera. And so what MC10 with its conformal electronics proprietary technology has been working on is essentially what I'm holding here, which is this sort of flexible little thing, which is probably not showing up that well, but that's a good thing because that's how small it is. This is a self-contained mobile sensing computer. So what we've been working on in conjunction with UCB is something that has the ability to communicate, that has the ability to measure, that we're going to validate those measurements, and in fact is so wearable, and hence the conformability, that people forget it's on. And that's critical because the kinds of patients we're talking about, another one of the pretty important P words, are going to be potentially diagnosed with a condition that they're going to have to live with for decades. And the physicians to my left can certainly agree to that, where we can't solve those problems. We cannot cure that disease per se. So if you're going to live with this for decades and you want to know more about yourself, how do you maximize your own life potential, you want to know as much information as you can about it. So this.
Can you guys see this? Good. That's the idea. You're not supposed to. It goes away. And I think that's a key reality to this kind of technology, that it's small, it's unobtrusive, and it's becoming smaller and smaller. The drug, however, is not in here now. So let's try to get everybody on the same page here. Explain to me how this is used, where it's applied, and how it may potentially evolve to a consolidated unit. And we can talk a little bit more about utility and efficacy.
Absolutely. I'll start and then pass it over to James. So essentially, because it is wearable and you're not worried about just measuring something from the wrist, we can actually put it on the shin, the ankle, the chest, the upper and lower arms. There's a pretty amazing little test that's done in neurologists' offices today about finger tapping. If any of you are familiar with the arena, you would know that. And the reality is this thing is actually flexible enough that if you put it on the back of the wrist, we can actually discern finger tapping, which is a commonly accepted neurological test. So what we're providing from a technology standpoint is the ability to measure things we never were able to measure, and a time sequence or series that we were never able to measure them at night, during the day, all through the day, at home, as you wish. And all of this in a sort of purpose-built way. And the purpose actually very much defined by the clinical expertise brought to the table by our friends at UCB.
So Michael, I want you to chime in and give us, be the voice of reason. As a clinician, so what? I'm going to shrug my shoulders and tell me what, does this excite you? Does this show clinical promise? And what are some of the pitfalls about this kind of technology?
Yeah, so I think what's surprising in a way is that most doctors are not thrilled, I would say, by this opportunity. And they're not thrilled not because they don't want to take better care of their patients. Of course we do. The challenge we've got is how does this fit into my mental model of how I take care of patients? As a physician, I'm taught to diagnose and treat problems. I prescribe medications, I order tests, I take care of patients in a very clear, constructive process that I've learned about since I was in medical school. How does this wearable patch, which is generating all kinds of data, help me diagnose or treat? That's unfortunately much more of a barrier than you might think. I don't think it's insurmountable, but I think it's a barrier that we already know about because we've had telehealth technologies monitoring people in their homes, not in the same way, not as directly, but for the last 10 years, we've had devices in people's homes measuring their weights and heart failure issues, and we haven't had as much uptake for that as we would like. Here's an opportunity, though, to say to our clinicians, and it's not just doctors anymore, it's pharmacists and the nurse care managers who I work with, it's the care coordinators and health coaches. And that's the other thing, is the data that comes in, does it need to be seen by a doctor, or can the computer just interpret all of that so it can tell me there's something wrong, or can a nurse look at it, or even a non-nurse is trained to look at red, yellow, green based on algorithms? That's the opportunity, is to make this something that fits into the workflow for our clinicians today. And first of all, answers one very simple question, which you alluded to. Did my patient take this medicine? Are they adhering to the recommendations that I've made? What we know is that about 10 to 20% of the medications that are prescribed for patients, the patient never picks it up from the pharmacy. So right away, you've lost 10 to 20% of your effectiveness. Then we know for people with chronic illnesses, whether it's Parkinson's, high blood pressure, diabetes, after about 6 months, a third of them will not be taking those medications or not be taking them properly. So you've gone from 10 to 20%, now you're about half of the people are not taking the medications which we prescribed. So how are we helping them if they're not able to take medications? And there are a lot of good reasons why those things happen. And is it because the patients don't want to take the medications? There are lots of barriers that get in the way of adherence. But just answering the simple question, did I take my medication today as it was prescribed? Did I remember to put that patch on my arm? Which sounds like a very simple thing. Well, is it every day, every 3 days? It turns out to be much more complicated.
So adherence is one issue, but to me, the issue is so much bigger than that. It's the acquisition of such amazing data and the application of that data, these data, to therapy, to dosage modulation, to really looking at, we're no longer tweaking a drug back in the days of kind of changing the milligram dosage. We're really modulating therapy in such a fine-tuned way based upon exquisite data. So is that part of the promise of the relationship between UCB and MC10?
It absolutely is, and I think I would add to Mike's point about simply taking the pharmaceutical agent. The reality is it's not just about whether you take it, even though that's clearly a big deal, as Mike articulated, but it's also about, did it work for you? So many people have issues with pharmaceutical agents that don't necessarily work for them. There's actually statistics out there that depending on which disease state you're talking about, up to 50% of the medications prescribed don't actually work for the person that they're actually prescribed for. And you go to a second-line drug, a third-line drug, a fourth-line drug. That's where we go. So I think it's the combination of, are you taking it, and then did it do something for you? And that's where I think we come in as well. James?
And I would just add that did it do something for you, but did it do for you what is most important, right? And so in the case of a particular disorder, maybe symptom control on a Thursday morning when your grandkids come to visit or is the most important, right? Or maybe during the week, symptom control in motor symptoms is most important, and at the weekend, sleeping well is more important. Applying the same medicine in the morning as the afternoon, day in, day out, is not going to achieve that aim for the patient or for the physician. So now it's not just about having a high-tech way of solving the same problem that we've been solving for 20 or 30 years. There's a whole new vista of problems that we can start to solve that are individually relevant to the patient, that have not been something we couldn't tackle for the last 20 years.
So are you changing the frequency and dose of drug delivery based upon the data that the patch provides, or how do they work closed loop?
So for this collaboration, it's an iterative process. So the first step will be to have gathered data over a few weeks or a month to figure out how is that prescription delivered for the patient. Which symptoms were better, which symptoms were worse, with a degree of granularity that would have required a nurse or a physician standing alongside the patient 24 hours a day, which is impractical. The next step from there is to say, okay, now we have granularity about day by day, week by week, month by month. Instead of receiving a prescription that is the same for every day, you might get a box of Band-Aids, right? You might get pills that are different shapes and sizes with a simple dashboard or application that will guide you. Tomorrow you should do this, the next day you should take that, based on how you're doing. So there's a lot of research that's shown that the more frequently you adjust and check in, how am I doing relative to my goal, just increasing that frequency will increase your probability of having a healthy outcome. And so this technology increases the frequency without going to see your neurologist every 15 minutes.
So you get a baseline of data up front, let's say off drug or however, right?
Sure.
So what's the significance of diagnosis, of disease management and evaluation, even outside of the context of the drug? So if we just separate that, because everybody talks about the holy grail of the fitness tracker and all these little accelerometers that somehow give you keen data on health. I'm suspect to that. I think you guys are really the true tracker to help find really rich, physiologic, clinically appropriate data. Yes?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, the P word I would go back to is just people. So patients are people. In fact, they're people most of the time. They're patients some of the time. And when we sort of devolve this all the way down to simply a physician and patient interaction, we sort of miss the fact that the folks who have movement disorders and live with these for decades are very interested in how they're sleeping. They're very interested in whether diet controls how they feel and how they take the medication. They're very interested in how exercise influences the same thing. So I think that's where we really want to go. And I think for MC10, who we think of ourselves very much as not just a medical company, but a medical and consumer company at the same time, we're thinking not just about, okay, what does the patient need, but how do we integrate other sources of input, which could be from our own sensors or others, to create a picture for that individual that is, in fact, as I mentioned before, purpose-built for the condition they have, but allows them to live their life better.
Where are you in development, clinical development on this for movement disorders? If you can, I don't know.
So yeah, right now we're in feasibility and proof of concept pilots, right? So we are testing in real patients with real conditions in realistic clinical trial settings to establish, can the technology deliver something of the quality that a nurse practitioner or a physician would deliver, right? And so that's our gold standard, right? If from this technology we can, for a patient, get data that is of the same quality that if you did a rigorous clinical assessment as a nurse practitioner or a general neurologist, then that quality, then that's our proof of concept hurdle.
Michael, let me put you on the spot. Yesterday, if you remember, we did a little bit of a hot or not kind of thing, rating it from 1 to 10. Separate yourself from this panel and be honest. Where are we from 1 to 10 as an innovative, important, and exciting technology in digital health, 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest?
I'd say, well, if you're asking doctors,
I'm asking you.
I think it's a 10. I mean, I think the opportunity to understand the quality of life from the patient's perspective, and as a geriatrician, it's all about function. That's what we're taught is the most important question, not diagnosis, not the treatments. And most of our patients don't just have Parkinson's disease. They also have high blood pressure, diabetes. So being able to understand not just the primary driver of their function, their tremor or their movement problems, but their totality of are they getting out of bed, are they moving around, which can also reflect depression or other things too. That's really the opportunity, and that's what really excites me, is a different way of understanding the impact not only of one medicine at a time, but the totality of the medications and the diet and the exercise and their daughters visiting and all the rest of it. That to me is what makes this so fantastic.
That's interesting because yesterday, the things that got the 10s, the thing that got people excited were things like cybersecurity, 3D printing, and they seem to be a bit removed from the clinical, from the practice of medicine. And I think here we're seeing digital health having real granular, practical applications to patient care. And I think that's an important development. So it's real exciting. And I think it's important to people recognize the work that MC10 is doing, the nature of the patch, and how this technology could be transformative to so many patients. Now, my question is, how do you get there? In today's world, I've been talking a lot about this word called the collaboratory. That when we talk about the evolution of pharma and the strict, rigid, traditional drug development side of the pharmaceutical industry, we also have technology and innovation. And they often are antithetical. And here we have a relationship which I think typifies the emergence of new relationships in life science. And so, how's it going? Let's talk about the social. Let's talk about the functional. Do you guys get in a room? Do you have 50-50 veto power? Do you argue over data endpoints? I really want to get into that a little bit.
I think that's a fascinating question, and it will come to a P word we've already mentioned, which is people.
Yeah.
Right. So you can have standard operating procedures, you can have governance, you can have contracts, memorandums of understanding, but ultimately it's a trustful relationship.
Yeah.
And so the critical piece is to get in a room with people, and you feel that, okay, this is someone I can talk to. They get it. And that's the fundamental basis of a good collaboration. I would say certainly initially there's a meeting of two very different species, right? A small tech startup and a medium or big size pharmaceutical company. I can't speak for all pharma, but my general view is when it comes to embracing this technology, within pharma, the mind is willing, but the flesh is weak, right? So our ability to actually implement some of these technological solutions is a challenge, but we all want to go there. And so what MC10 is a great example of, it brings to us the speed, the agility, the startup thinking, the entrepreneurship, that it's not just about we need the conformal electronic technology from them as part of our partnership. We need their mindset, we need their culture. We need people that think that way to help drive this collaboration, and that's why it comes back to people.
One of the accelerators, Health Excel in Dublin, looked at this dynamic between smaller, stealthy, agile startups and big pharma, and what they showed is that the technological innovation comes from like an MC10, but they need market access, they need patience, and they need some level of validation, and pharma's very good at validating. They have the mechanisms in place. So do you think this is a sustainable model moving forward, that pharma more broadly will begin to adapt to somehow take the digital health movement and push it into the mainstream?
I think it is sustainable, but I think it's also a bit of a dating game, right? And so there are dozens and dozens of pharmaceutical companies, some big, some small, some mid-sized, and hundreds and thousands of tech startups. And it can be difficult to predict at first what will work. And I'm not sure it's just based on the size of the company and the portfolio and the product that will determine the success. The secret sauce is much more about the culture within the companies and the people involved, and making sure you've got empowered teams. So you'll find certain companies will work well together, and it will become sustainable and more common, but that doesn't mean that every potential pairing and partnership is going to take off.
What I found interesting in discussing with you guys, and I don't want to disclose terms of the relationship, but it wasn't like you're talking tech, and you're talking marketing, or you're talking therapeutics. It was, you were both speaking the same language. you know, rich clinical data came from you, and technological aspects of functionality and practicality were coming from you too. So I thought that it was a real interesting mix, and maybe that's part of the secret sauce, I don't know. But I think that over time we're going to be seeing a lot more of this, and I think that they are both very successful, but they also may be doomed to fail in certain instances if that connection isn't made. So any final comments about the nature of moving forward and some of the opportunities? You see maybe 2-3 years out, what looms on the horizon with UCB movement disorders and some of your wishful thinking without...
I mean, for me, the holy grail, and it may be more than 2 or 3 years, is to have a truly adaptive medicine, right? Where there is an automatic sensing of how the patient is doing, and either the dosage or the mode of delivery is now automatically waxing and waning according to that patient need.
So I think that's our phrase of the morning: adaptive medicine, adaptive care. I think that's very interesting.
My other prediction for the future is failure. And I don't mean to be pessimistic, but we will fail at certain points. And the key is that we learn from that and grow and adapt. But it's a risky venture, right? And so because of the unknown, some stuff won't work out, and we will have to structure things so that each time we learn and iterate. Interesting.
Rob, you come around, then we'll end up with you. So what's on the future? What's some of the... I just want to talk about consolidating drug into patch. Is that something that's on the horizon? Is that a wish list thing or as a single unit?
There are actually already patches, as we've mentioned, that can drive drug into the skin. So in terms of it being a wish list, no. I don't. In terms of the conceptual ability to take the sensing mechanism and combine it with a drug delivery mechanism, not only is that not a wish list item, but our scientific godfather, John Rogers at UIUC, has actually already published on the topic. So you can find those articles. So no, I think it's really all about the other P around practicality. Let's just get it done. Let's execute. Because at this point, I would venture to the audience and to many other people, the technology's here. What I'm showing you today is not actually what UCB bought into 6-9 months ago when we first started talking. We were actually 2 generations away from this. So that's a credit both to the input that UCB provided and frankly to our own technical horsepower.
So Michael, you sit between these 2 guys, and I think you're a bit of the arbiter of reason and clinical logic. So
my mom would be really proud of me for doing that too. So
that's good.
Thank you.
So what are your concluding thoughts about the nature of this adaptive care and how that may help drive improved outcomes?
I really believe that this is the opportunity of the future, is to understand in real time. Like, we have insulin pumps today that automatically adjust the dose based on the blood glucose to sugar levels.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about. It's not just for diabetes, but for a whole host of other illnesses, pain management, depression, things that we haven't really been able to do well at. I think what's interesting is that the providers, how many providers are here in the audience? Can you raise your hands? So very few, 3, 4, 5. We've literally been left out of this conversation so far, so I really appreciate being invited in, because I think it's not only a symbolic welcoming, but actually recognition that if you're going to come up with all these wonderful solutions, the medications and the patches and the technology, we have to be part of this conversation too, and we want to be part of this conversation, because that's what's going to help us take better care of our patients, better health, better care, lower cost, and more satisfaction for providers. What makes us happiest is when our patients do better, and this is a clear road to do that. So thank you.
I think that's great. In conclusion, let me say that sometimes digital health is like winking at someone in the dark. You know you're doing it, but no one else does. And I think the ability to be inclusive by having multiple partners, by bringing technology together with pharma, with providers, with caregivers, that it really opens up a wonderful vista for making tremendous changes. So thank you, gentlemen, very much. Thank you.
Thank you.